Welcome back, my friends. It's Perry once more, here to talk to you about some fundamentals. We're going to cover a lot of ground in regards to information technology, but before we do, I thought it might be helpful to start covering the basics. And there's nothing more basic than a computer. What the heck is a computer? Now, the reality is you're surrounded by computers. They're everywhere. They're just not that big desktop with a monitor on your desk. They're all around. So the official definition of a computer is that it's a device that accepts information in the form of digitized data, then it manipulates it for some result based on a program or sequence of instructions on how the data is to be processed. All right, well, that's a little confusing, but what does that really mean? Well, to put it simply, your phone is a computer. Your Xbox is a computer. Your car's GPS is a computer. Heck, even the new thermostats, the one I have in my house anyways, it's a computer. They're all made up of the same components, and they are everywhere. So let's dig into those components, because it takes several things to actually make up a computer, and if any one of them were to break, the computer wouldn't function any longer. So first component, well, you need a case. Case keeps it all together, keeps all the parts safe, protects them from outside damage, but a case is actually more important than that. The case actually helps with heat, because computers produce a whole lot of heat. They get really hot. In fact, this was a problem back in the old days where computers used to overheat. Now we have cases that help with that problem as well as fans, but they help distribute the air effectively, and they help pull the air away from those parts that might be negatively impacted by that heat. Next, we got the motherboard. The motherboard is kind of like the heart. It's the plumbing. It's what everything plugs into. All the cabling and wiring goes plugged into the motherboard. So it's basically a physical arrangement in a computer that contains the basic circuitry and components. Also, often motherboards have heat sinks or fans on them. So they're specifically designed to help with that whole heat problem, which is generally an issue when doing computer design. Next, we've got the CPU, or the Central Processing Unit. Now, this is the brain. This does the heavy thinking. This is what enables us to actually have a computer in the first place. And it plugs into the motherboard. What's crazy, though, is when I think about how far CPUs have come in the last 10 years, it's mind-blowing. I read a statistic recently that said that the average CPU in a modern smartphone is significantly more powerful than the computing processing power they had when we launched to go to the moon. So give that some thought. But anyway, CPU, your brain of the computer. Next, we got RAM, or which stands for Random Access Memory. Now, RAM is what stores what you're working on in temporary storage in a memory state. And once the computer gets shut off, then all that information's erased. So think about you're playing a video game, or you're writing a document in Microsoft Word, all those keystrokes you're doing, or you're making a PowerPoint, but you haven't hit save yet. All that work as you're working gets saved in RAM. So people, you hear them talking about, oh, my computer's slow, I need more RAM. Well, what that means is they want to be able to run more programs and have it perform more effectively on the computer. And to do that, you need more random access memory to store your temporary work as you're working on it. Next on the list, we got your hard drive. Pretty self-explanatory, but your hard drive is where all your files live. So when it gets transferred from memory, when you hit save or when you save as that file, it gets saved onto a hard drive. And that hard drive could be on your laptop, or it could be on a connected hard drive, or it could even be a hard drive on your server at work. But at some point, your content needs to reside on a physical hard drive for it to be stored properly. Now, this is permanent storage, and it's, you need a lot of it. Now, luckily now, with all the data we have, hard drives are getting really, really big and really, really cheap, which is awesome. But it's also good when you're thinking about the computer, you might want to have a backup hard drive, because your hard drive is definitely a single point of failure. And if you lose that guy, like, you could lose the CPU, no big deal. Well, it's expensive, but you wouldn't lose your data. You lose your hard drive, everything you've been working on, totally gone. So just something to think about. It's good to have a backup hard drive as well. Next, we got the video card. I could talk hours about the video card. Video cards have come so far in the last 4 or 5 years, and the primary reason for that is video games. Video and media are very processor intensive. So they need lots and lots of processing. They also need lots and lots of random access memory to deal with all those heavy graphics. So video cards have almost become computers unto themselves. They process the video and graphic data and they send it up through your display. But all that processing, they have a separate processor, what's called a GPU, a graphic processing unit, as well as a bunch of extra memory to deal with the intense requirements that come from modern video games and other media programs such as like video editing. Next on the list, keyboard. Fairly self-explanatory. The keyboard inputs the commands and letters into the computer, plugs in via cable, generally a USB cable, and you type and it gets read. Now here's the thing. Keyboards are fairly remarkable things. This was one of the huge discoveries initially when they were doing and designing computers. It was actually pretty hard to figure out. So, even though the keyboard, we take it for granted, it's an amazing, amazing invention. And of course, the mouse. The mouse changed everything, totally made computers accessible to the average human being. So you wouldn't have to remember a bunch of random keystrokes to enter data. But mouse, straightforward. You plug it in again via your USB or a wireless connection. Voila. Next, we got your screen. So the screen shows the output from the video card and then allows you to virtually interact with your computer. Pretty self-explanatory once more. All right, networking, not so self-explanatory. Networking, really important and a bit complicated. So there are all kinds of networks out there. Most folks today have some sort of broadband in their home, at least in the US. Maybe it's cable coming out of Comcast or DSL coming from your phone company. But that is the starting point for a network. So what you're doing when you take their router and you plug into it with the computer, and you're probably going to plug into their internet connection via two ways. Either A, you get a wireless connection on your computer that then connects to the wireless router, which then connects to the internet, or you get a cable that plugs from your computer into their router and then again it goes out to the internet. So in order to be able to communicate with other devices, whether it be the router that lets you go out to the internet, or maybe your printer that has a wireless connection, or maybe it's another computer on your home network, you've got to be able to have a network connection. And generally, the two most common network connections today are going to be what's called a LAN card, which plugs in. It's when you plug the cable in the back, that's called the LAN card, or a wireless card, which bypasses the need for a cable and just connects via wireless to a wireless router on your network. And we're going to spend a whole lot of time talking about networking later, but very important. You don't have a network card, you can't play with others. But we'll get into that more in a bit. Next, the operating system. Super important, the operating system. This is the software that supports all the computer's basic functions. It is the most important program that lives on your hard drive and runs your computer. It does all the kind of boring stuff that actually you probably don't care about, like scheduling tasks, executing applications, and controlling all the computer's peripherals and hardwares via things called drivers. So the CPU and the operating system, that's really, if your CPU is your brain, your operating system is the personality and all your memories that go along with it. So they're very, very important. And again, we'll spend more time with that in a bit. And applications, all those great things that we load on our computers. Microsoft Word, Adobe Photoshop, Call of Duty, whatever it is, all those applications or programs. And for the purpose of our course, we're going to kind of use application and programs interchangeably. So if you hear me say program, I mean application. If you hear me say application, I mean program. There are some differences with what they call the app model that's coming out now, but I'll spend some time more with that later. But right now, we're just going to use them interchangeably. But regardless, your application/programs, they are the executable software that runs on a computer. And it's basically a bunch of compiled software code that's specifically designed for a purpose, like I need Word, I need to be able to create documents, or I want to edit files with Photoshop. So really important, your applications. Of course, apps also reside on your phone or your Xbox. So the games that you play on your Xbox are basically apps or programs. When you're doing Angry Birds on your iPhone, that's an application. So same concepts, just different platforms. And as I mentioned, everything's a computer. So if we go back to all the concepts here of whether it be an Xbox or a phone or whatever it might be, they all have the same components. They all have some kind of case. They all have memory. They have all some kind of storage. Maybe not exactly a hard drive, but they have some sort of storage. Motherboard, all of them have CPUs. Got to have the CPU. All of them have some sort of way to process video. All of them have keyboards, or a way to input data. Maybe it's in your Xbox, it's through your controller, keyboard and mouse type functionality. All of them have some sort of screen or can connect to a screen. All of them are networked. All of them have operating systems, and all of them have applications. That's universally true for any type of computer, whether it be your Xbox, your phone, whatever it might be. So just want to keep that in mind. Now, the operating system. We talked a little bit about the operating system, how it really is so critical to run your computer. It is, an operating system performs those basic tasks again and really kind of keeps everything straight. Your operating system allows you to work with the processor to run multiple programs at the same time, to connect your hard drive and your printer and your screen, your mouse. Again, those all have a driver or a little piece of program software that allows you to connect and let them run on your computer. It's the operating system that makes all that possible. Now, also, when we think about resources, so different programs take different resources. So maybe you have a video game you're playing and it needs all kinds of processing power, and it's taking up a lot of space on your hard drive, and it's sucking up your memory like crazy, and it needs the video card. Your operating system makes all that possible and keeps all those functions straight, and you never have to think about it. Your operating system is just in the back taking care of business, and it does a million different things every single second that you don't even have to think about. It also takes care of authorizing users. So when you log on to your computer at home and it says, hey, give me your password, that's all through the operating system. And then, again, one thing to keep in mind about operating systems, and there's not a lot of them. There's only really 3 out there, which are Microsoft, Apple, and Linux. Those are probably the most 3 that are common, and we'll talk about more about that later. But one thing to keep in mind is your operating system is specific and requires applications that were designed and coded for that operating system. So if you have Microsoft Word, Mac, you can't load that on Windows 8. If you have Windows 8 Photoshop, you can't run that on Mac. So that's really the only thing to keep in mind is when you're thinking about operating system and you're thinking about buying applications, just make sure you get the right application for the right operating system. So again, we talked about operating systems. There are really just 3. Windows 8, that's the big one now, though I've heard rumors of Windows 10. I'm not sure what happened to Windows 9, but that'll be interesting to see. But right now, Windows 8's Microsoft's big personal operating system for both Windows and personal use. Mac, iOS, really popular with a lot of folks. And then Linux. Now, I just put Linux up here. Between Windows and Mac, that's like 98% of the market. Windows being the leader, Mac definitely having a strong portion in the marketplace and being very popular. Linux is more for your kind of, I don't want to be discriminatory, but your hardcore geek, someone who really is into software development. And what Linux is an open source software platform that people have customized as an alternative to paying for software, to paying for Windows or paying for Mac. Again, it's not used a lot, and when it is used, it's generally for special purposes. So you'll see specialized computers that have all the components that we just discussed, but maybe they're for manufacturing. And those manufacturing computers might run Linux because it's free and it can be developed accordingly to take care of business for them, and they don't have to pay for the operating system. But again, you probably won't come across Linux much in your day-to-day operations. I just want to make you aware of it. All right, so that's the end of our session on computers. I didn't want to get too deep and geek out on you. The whole purpose of this session was really just to give you a foundation of what a computer is. And just to refresh, a computer is a series of components that are, your case, your RAM, your motherboard, your hard drive, your CPU, your video card, and your key, mouse, screen, networking, operating system, and apps. That's kind of it. And the big takeaway here is computers are everywhere. They generally use the same sort of components no matter what they are. There's definitely, tweaks and specialization, but in theory, the same principles really do apply. So when you look at your phone, you're looking at your computer. When you're looking at your new fancy thermostat, that could be a computer. So just think of it, they're all using the same components. They all need an operating system. They all have applications and programs. They all need a CPU, they all need RAM. You get me. So I'm going to wrap it up there. We'll move on to the next section. Thanks so much.